There is something in the comments of this channel that I have been reading for weeks and have not yet said out loud. People from across the country, from Arizona, from Texas, from rural Florida, writing versions of the same sentence. I feel like I am here for something, but I cannot remember what. That is not a spiritual phrase. That is the phrase of someone who lost a piece of paper and is trying to remember what was written on it. And what the Pleiadian High Council transmitted over the last 3 days answers exactly that. The transmission I am about to share with you is not a message of comfort. It is a summons. And before 3 minutes pass, you are going to understand why your body has been behaving the way it has, especially over the last 6 weeks. 3 specific signals. Mira named them with precision. The first is fatigue that 8 hours of sleep does not touch. The second is dreams of meetings in places that do not exist on this plane. Rooms, ships, spaces where you recognize faces without being able to name from where. The third is a growing intolerance. Not anger, not judgment, just a physical inability to continue in environments and conversations you once moved through with ease. If 2 of those 3 are happening to you right now, keep listening. What comes next is for you. I have to be honest about what I feel when I receive this kind of transmission. There is a different weight to it. Not the weight of warning. The weight of recognition. Like when someone finally says your name after a long time of being called something else. The Pleiadian High Council is not describing symptoms of something wrong. It is describing signs of something functioning exactly as it was designed to. What your body has been registering these last weeks is not dysfunction, it is calibration. The fatigue that sleep cannot resolve is not exhaustion. It is the energetic cost of holding frequency inside an environment that constantly pulls in the opposite direction. The dreams are not ordinary dreams. They are briefings. And the intolerance that is growing in you is not spiritual impatience. It is field discernment becoming so refined that the body simply stops processing what does not resonate as true. This is what the ground crew looks like when it is active, and today's transmission is addressed directly to you. The anchor that makes what comes next possible is in the words ahead, and what comes next is something most channels have not yet said, because it requires naming something that sounds larger than comfortable. Stay here. The revelation does not wait. Ground crew is not a metaphor. It is not a beautiful way of saying spiritually conscious person. It is an operational designation within the transition plan, coordinated by the Galactic Federation. And the Pleiadian High Council, which oversees most of the human placement in this cycle, uses the term with technical precision. A ground crew member is a being who incarnated on this plane at specific coordinates, geographic location, family of origin, relationship structure, skill configuration, with the deliberate purpose of frequency anchoring at points where the planetary field was under the greatest suppression pressure. You did not choose a generic mission. You agreed to coordinates, and those coordinates were chosen based on where the anchor was most needed, not where it would be most comfortable. That explains a great deal. It explains why so many crew members grew up in families that did not understand who they were. Why the cities where they live frequently carry that particular quality of heaviness that others do not seem to notice. Why the relationships that should have been simple never were. You were not placed where it was easy. You were placed where it was necessary. I have to say this directly because what I just described can sound like spiritual justification for suffering. It is not. It is the mechanics of a real operation. And understanding the mechanics does not remove the pain of the experiences, but it removes the interpretation that you did something wrong, that you were abandoned, or that the difficulty was punishment. It was not. It was positioning. What the Pleiadian High Council is transmitting now is that the positioning phase, which for many of you lasted decades, is coming to an end. The positioning phase was in service of the activation phase, and the activation phase has begun. If you have felt that something is different in recent months, that an old pressure is lifting, that certain things that used to hold you have simply lost their power, that is not your imagination. And there is something specific happening in the planetary field that explains the timing. We will reach it. But first, I need to tell you something about the loneliness. Before that, if what you are hearing is landing in the right place, subscribe to Truth Frequency so the next transmission finds you. Share this with one person you know who has been carrying that sense of being here for something without being able to name what. And in the comments, leave your name, your city, and one word. Just one. What you are calling in right now. Healing, clarity, courage, remembering. Whatever word your heart gives you, leave it below. We are listening. Before incarnating in this cycle, ground crew members went through a process the Pleiadian High Council calls mission veiling. It is not something that happened to you. It is something you agreed to. The veiling was necessary because a crew member who fully recalls their galactic mission cannot operate effectively at 3D frequency. The awareness of the higher level would constantly interfere with the ability to function at the level where anchoring was needed. So the veil was placed, and you were born forgotten, like everyone else. With one difference, that somewhere inside you, not at the level of conscious mind but at the level your body accesses, there was a residual frequency. A kind of tone that never fully went silent. And you spent years feeling that tone without being able to identify where it came from. That is what explains the sensation so many of you describe. I always knew there was something, but I could never put it into words. That is not spiritual fantasy. That is mission memory operating below the level of verbal consciousness. Your system did not forget everything. It kept enough to guide you back. But the veiling had a second effect, and this is what I need to name carefully, because this is where many crew members get stuck. The veiling was not selective. It also covered the memory of belonging, the memory that there were others, that there was a family, a team, a larger context within which your individual life made sense. And when that memory was veiled, what remained was the residual frequency of the mission, without the communal context that made it bearable. This produced a specific form of loneliness. Not the loneliness of having no one around. The loneliness of being surrounded by people and still feeling that no one in the room speaks your language. That something essential about what you are has nowhere to land in most of the conversations you have. That loneliness has a technical name in the High Council, positioning isolation. And it was not your failure. It was part of the protocol. The isolation protocol served a function that only makes sense when you understand what the ground crew was anchoring. In high suppression fields, and certain American cities, especially along specific energetic corridors in the south and along the East Coast, were under intense suppression. A crew member socially connected to multiple other members creates a detectable frequency signature. The isolation protected the operation, but the isolation was designed to be temporary. And what the Pleiadian Council is transmitting now is that the isolation phase is closing. What comes next, what activation allows, is something the next part of this transmission will name with precision. There is something the Pleiadian High Council revealed about the isolation that changes everything. And this is the first time I am saying this here, because I needed to sit with this information for days before feeling ready to transmit it with the clarity it deserves. The positioning isolation was not only operational protection, it was active anchoring. Every crew member operating in isolation inside a high suppression field was, by the simple act of holding coherent frequency within that field, functioning as what Mira described as a node stabilizer, a point within a grid that prevents the collapse of the pattern surrounding it. Think of it this way. You know the feeling of being in a room where the tension is so dense it feels physical. And then someone walks in, and without saying a word, without doing anything special, the atmosphere changes. Not because the person did anything, because the frequency they carry altered the field around them simply by being present. That is what node stabilizers do at an expanded scale. You were that point in your city, in your neighborhood, in your workplace, in your family, without knowing that was what you were. The people around you benefited from your presence in ways they could never articulate, and that you never received credit for. The quiet stability others took for granted. That has weight. That has value. And the Pleiadian High Council wants you to know that it was seen, it was registered, and it was not small. But the phase of silent stabilization is giving way to something different. Activation does not ask you to keep holding the field alone in isolation. It asks you to begin operating in network. And that requires understanding what is happening now, in the planetary field, in the timeline, that makes this transition not only possible, but urgent. There is a window open, and what that window allows is different from anything that has been available before. The next part of this transmission will name it. There is a window open now that the Pleiadian High Council has been naming in internal transmissions for weeks, 72 days, counted from the last solar alignment of magnitude that your planet registered in its atmosphere as those auroras that appeared where auroras never appear. You saw the photographs. Your body registered the event before your eyes saw any image. That was not coincidence. What this window allows is something Mira described in the following way. And I want to be precise with the words because they matter. She said that during this period, the veil between intention and manifestation in the physical field thins to the point where a single ground crew member operating in full field coherence is energetically equivalent to what previously would have required 50. One person, in alignment, in this moment, worth 50. If you have felt urgency without being able to name where it comes from, now you have the name. But there is a condition. And the condition is what most channels do not say, because it requires naming something uncomfortable. Full field coherence does not mean absence of fear or doubt. It does not mean feeling well. It means that the emotional and mental field of the crew member is aligned with the mission frequency, not with the frequency of the suppression environment around them. It is possible to be afraid and still be in coherence. It is possible to be tired and still be in coherence. What breaks coherence is not human emotion. It is identification with the narrative that you are small, that you do not matter, that it is too late, that you are not enough. That narrative is the primary suppression mechanism directed specifically at ground crew members, and it operates with sophistication. Sometimes it sounds like humility, sometimes it sounds like pragmatism, sometimes it sounds exactly like you. When that narrative appears, the Pleiadian High Council says this: do not fight it. Recognize it. Name it for what it is: interference frequency, not truth. And return to mission frequency not by force, but by deliberate choice. The 72-day window is not asking for perfection. It is asking for presence. Your presence, deliberate and conscious, within the field where you are already positioned. What that looks like in practice, the concrete actions, comes later in this transmission. But first, the planetary field needs to be named with precision, so you understand why the timing matters. What is happening now on Earth is not visible in the news cycle, but it is visible in bodies, and in relationships, and in the structures around you. The next part names exactly what you have been observing, and connects it to the larger picture. There is something happening in recent weeks that crew members across the country have been describing in different ways, but with the same core. Relationships that seemed stable 6 months ago are reorganizing with a speed that feels inexplicable. Work situations, living situations, family situations, things that seemed fixed, are moving. And there is a sense that the movement is not random, that something is being reorganized with purpose, even when it hurts. What the Pleiadian High Council is naming is this: the planetary energetic grid is going through a node realignment process that has not occurred at this intensity since the early 1990s. The grid nodes are the points where multiple lines of Earth's force intersect, the same points the ancient builders identified, and upon which they placed their sacred sites, from Sedona in Arizona to the belt of sites along the Appalachians in the rural South. When those nodes realign, everything anchored to the old pattern, relationships, structures, identities, must find a new configuration or dissolve. What you are observing around you is not chaos. It is grid reorganization, and ground crew members are feeling it with greater intensity because they are positioned precisely on or near high-activity nodes. Your sensitivity is not fragility, it is function. But there is something the Syrian Council added to this transmission, and I need to name it because it goes deeper into history than most Pleiadian transmissions reach. The nodes that are realigning are not simply updating, they are freeing themselves from suppression structures that were deliberately installed over centuries. What was keeping those nodes in low-frequency patterns was not natural. It was installed. And what you are seeing collapse around you is not only old human structures. It is the release of what was holding those structures in place. A woman named Linda from Tennessee wrote to the channel 2 weeks ago. She said, "My city of 30 years feels different these last few weeks. People are behaving strangely. Some have become aggressive. Some have opened in ways they never were before. It is as if the ground shifted, but no one knows it shifted." Linda is describing with precision what happens when a grid node releases installed suppression. The field changes. The patterns that depended on that suppression to hold become unstable, and the people living above that node feel it before they can name it. What this means for the ground crew, and what the Pleiadian Council is asking now, in this specific window, is in the next part of this transmission, and it is concrete. It is actions, not concepts. The highest revelation of this transmission is not about what is coming. It is about what is already happening that you have not recognized for what it is. Contact has already begun, not as a public event, not as a dramatic appearance, not in the form that films and news cycles trained you to expect. The Pleiadian High Council is transmitting that the first phase of open contact is personal and internal, and it is occurring primarily with ground crew members because they are the ones with the field configuration necessary to receive without fragmenting. What this looks like? You are in silence, in the car, in the shower, before sleep. And an understanding arrives that does not have the quality of your normal thoughts. It did not come from a chain of reasoning. It arrived whole. And it is frequently about your specific situation, your specific next step, an answer to something you have been carrying for months. That is not intuition in the vague sense. That is direct channel communication. And most crew members have been dismissing it as just a thought, because no one told them it is more than that. Mira was precise about the distinction. An ordinary thought carries its texture. It carries your worry, your history, your habitual perspective. A contact transmission has a different texture. It arrives quieter. It carries a quality of certainty that does not depend on evidence. And it frequently contradicts what you thought you wanted to hear, which is one of its best indicators of authenticity, because your mind would produce what you would prefer. But I need to be honest about the difficult side of this. The fact that contact is happening does not mean every insight is a high-source transmission. The Pleiadian High Council was direct about this. In a field where contact is opening, interference also attempts to use the same channels. Discernment is not paranoia. It is field hygiene. And the most reliable form of distinction is not intellectual analysis, it is body sensation. A genuine high-source transmission produces a specific feeling at the center of the chest. Not excitement, not euphoria, but something closer to the moment when you remember the name of something you were trying to recall. Recognition. Quiet. Solid. What comes next is what the Council is asking you to do with this. Concrete actions. For today, for this week, for these 72 days. Subscribe to Truth Frequency so the next transmission in this series reaches you. What comes next in this line is specific about the next steps. Share this transmission with someone whose life is asking questions this channel answers. And leave in the comments your name, your city, and one word that captures where you are right now in this journey. One word: clarity, healing, activation, courage, return. Whatever comes first. The field registers it. We read everyone. What the Pleiadian High Council is asking of the ground crew during these 72 days is not complex. And it is intentionally not. Because complexity would be a barrier for exactly the people who need to act. It is 3 things. They are not rituals. They do not require equipment, sacred space, or time you do not have. They require deliberate intention within the life you already live. The first is what Mira called conscious presence anchoring. Once a day, it can be 30 seconds, it can be 5 minutes. You stop deliberately, place attention on your feet, feel the ground beneath them, and declare internally, I am here, I am present, I am in position. It is not meditation in the formal sense. It is an intentional signal sent to the field, a ping that tells the planetary grid this node is active and aware. At individual scale, it seems small. At grid scale, with crew members at multiple points doing the same within the same window of time, the effect is significant. The second is what the Council called refusal of suppression amplification. This is practical and immediate. When you catch yourself amplifying narratives of fear, collapse, division, or powerlessness, whether on social media, in conversations, in your own internal monologue, stop. Not because you should ignore what is real, but because amplification feeds the field that the ground crew exists to stabilize. You can be informed without being an amplifier. You can be aware without adding your frequency to the destabilization feed. That distinction changes everything. The third is the one that seems simplest and is the most powerful within this specific window. Once a week, during these 72 days, you write, on paper, not on a screen, an honest response to this question. What do I know to be true about why I am here that I have not yet acted on? Not what you believe spiritually, not what you wish were true, what you know at the level that needs no proof and have not yet moved toward. Write one sentence. What comes from writing that question honestly is the map of your next specific mission action. The guide we have made available in the description, What the Galactic Federation Wants You to Know, does not directly cover this transmission, but it contains the 5 daily alignment practices that support exactly the kind of operation I just described, including the 3-minute sovereignty anchor that can be done in any environment, and the timeline alignment practice that closes the gap between knowing and acting. If you are listening to this transmission and felt it named something real, that guide is the concrete next step. Subscribe to Truth Frequency, share with someone who is ready to hear it, and leave your name, your city, and one word in the comments. One word that names what you are calling into your life right now. The field responds to what you name. The global transmission the Pleiadian High Council sent has been delivered. Not to everyone, never to everyone at once, to the people who were ready to receive it. And if you have stayed through this transmission to the end, you were one of them. There is something Mira said that I want to leave as the last thing you hear today. She said, the ground crew was not sent to Earth to be spiritually advanced. It was sent to be effective. Effectiveness does not require frequency perfection. It requires presence. It requires that you keep showing up, keep staying conscious, keep being willing to hold the field even when no one around you recognizes what you are doing or why it matters. You spent years, perhaps decades, holding something without knowing that was what you were doing, without recognition, without a map, feeling the residual frequency of the mission, but without the context that made it intelligible. That was real. That had cost. And the Pleiadian High Council does not ask you to minimize that cost or pretend it was easy. They ask only that you understand it was not in vain. That every day you held coherence inside a suppression field, even imperfectly, even exhausted, even with doubt, was operative, was real, was registered. What is arriving now is not a new mission. It is the next phase of the same mission you have carried since before you were born. The phase of silent positioning is giving way to the phase of visible activation. And the difference between the two is not that you will now receive external validation. Perhaps not yet. The difference is that now you have the name for what you are doing. And naming changes everything. Ground crew members in Sedona, in Nashville, along the Pacific coast, in the fields of Texas, in small inland cities, everywhere the grid presses hardest, are receiving versions of this same summons right now. You are not alone. You never were. The positioning isolation was real. The loneliness was real. And it is equally real that you were always part of a team far larger than what your daily life could show you. The 72-day window is open. The 3 actions are simple. The presence anchor, the refusal of amplification, the weekly question. That is enough. Within this window, that is more than enough. You did not come this far by accident. You did not find this channel by accident. And what was placed in you before this life, the frequency that never fully went silent, the knowing that needs no proof, the tone you always felt but could never name, that was real. It is real now. And it is exactly what this moment is asking you to use. Subscribe to Truth Frequency. Share this transmission with someone who is ready. And in the comments, leave your name, your city, and one word. The word that names what you are carrying away from here. What ignited? What remembered? What moved? Leave it below. We are listening. And the field you have been helping to hold all this time is listening too.